Tonight, a suicide bomber strikes inside a U.S. base in Afghanistan. At least 8 Americans are killed. I'm Harry Smith. Also tonight, the hunt for accomplices in the airline attack. Authorities want to know who trained the suspect, who gave him the explosives, and if another attack is imminent.
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
Good evening. Katie is off tonight. It's supposed to be a secure facility in a very dangerous part of Afghanistan. But today, a suicide bomber struck at a U.S. forward operating base in Khost province near the Pakistani border. At least 8 American civilians were killed when the attacker detonated a vest loaded with explosives. The questions tonight: how did a terrorist get in, or worse, was it an inside job? The latest now from David Martin at the Pentagon.
This is where it happened, a well-fortified combat outpost in eastern Afghanistan. Somehow, a suicide bomber was able to bring his explosives on the base, walk up to a group of American civilians, and blow himself up. It will take an investigation to determine how he did it. But the outpost is located in the middle of a notorious stronghold for Afghan insurgents near the border with Pakistan. Afghan soldiers and civilians are present at almost every American outpost, since one of the chief principles of the U.S. strategy is to partner with the Afghans. According to Christine Fair of Georgetown University, some of them may actually be working for the Taliban.
They have really become a vehicle of infiltration for the Taliban, and this is most certainly a vulnerability in our strategy going forward in trying to hand security over to the Afghans, is that we don't really have a way of figuring out who we can trust.
Combat outposts located deep in enemy-controlled territory come under frequent attack, although usually from the outside, not the inside. Last October, 8 U.S. soldiers were killed when insurgents very nearly overran this outpost. And CBS News has been told 4 officers received warning letters for not having done a better job of preparing their defenses. A year ago last July, 9 soldiers were killed when their outpost was almost overrun. That battle is still under investigation. In both cases, the bases were saved by the arrival of Apache helicopters, which drove the attackers back.
Be advised, we're in a bad situation. Need you to come in hot immediately.
8 American dead make for a very grim end to what has been the worst year ever for the U.S. in Afghanistan. Harry?
David Martin in Washington of the Pentagon tonight. Thanks. The latest now on the attempt to blow up Flight 253. Today, Dutch authorities said they'll start using full body scanners for flights heading to the United States. They believe that kind of machine could have stopped suspect Omar Farouk Abdulmutallab in his tracks. Also today, word of a case with chilling similarities to the Christmas Day attack. Last month, a Somali man reportedly tried to board a jet in Mogadishu while carrying powdered chemicals, liquid, and a syringe. He was arrested by African peacekeeping troops. All this as concern mounts that new attacks may be in the works. Chief Investigative Correspondent Armin Katayan is here with more. Armin?
Good evening, Harry. CBS News has learned law enforcement's top priority now is to identify if similar attacks are imminent, pressing to find out who was training alongside Abdulmutallab in Yemen, who associated with him and provided him with explosives, as we learn more about the failure of the intelligence community to prevent the Christmas Day attack. A senior counterterrorism official told CBS News today the intelligence community knew al-Qaeda was planning what he called a Christmas surprise for months, but was unable to come up with something credible to connect the dots until it was too late.
We should have stopped an individual from coming into the country that fell through the cracks.
The problem, what the official termed no sense of urgency within the intelligence community, compounded by information overload at the National Counterterrorism Center in McLean, Virginia, which receives some 8,000 messages a day.
Quite simply, what went wrong is a lack of communication between the State Department, the intelligence community, Department of Homeland Security.
Adding to the system breakdown, says another source, confusion between the Counterterrorism Center and the State Department over whether or not Abdulmutallab's name was in a national terrorist database. One agency thought the other was checking, and nobody did. In fact, as early as 2009, the CIA had intelligence on a man dubbed the Nigerian, linked to terrorist elements in Yemen. But it was only after the Christmas Day attack that the agency figured out the Nigerian was in fact Abdulmutallab. And that was 5 weeks after Abdulmutallab's father raised concerns to the CIA. Joseph Cuellar, a former CIA and military intelligence officer, says there's no excuse for this kind of failure.
You know, they had information that an analyst could have quickly put together and said, wow, something's wrong here, and that it didn't get done.
To make matters worse, Abdulmutallab wasn't hard to find in Yemen. He regularly attended a local mosque and studied at an Arabic school, communicating with the American-born radical Muslim cleric Anwar al-Awlaki, said to have influenced Major Nidal Hassan's massacre at Fort Hood. The intelligence review ordered by President Obama is due tomorrow, one that will undoubtedly show 8 years after 9/11. A lot of lessons about information sharing have yet to be learned. Harry?
Armen Keteyian, thank you so much. We want to bring in our justice correspondent, Bob Orr. Bob, good evening.
Good evening, Harry.
We are starting to learn a lot more about this radical Imam Awlaki, who was actually born in the United States. Tell us.
And it's actually frightening, Harry. U.S. officials now, almost to a man, are becoming increasingly more convinced that Anwar al-Awlaki is more than a radical cleric. The sources we've talked to say that he's a coordinator, even a facilitator, or a talent recruiter, if you will, for al-Qaeda and all of its franchises. The FBI will not say if Awlaki and the suspect in the Detroit case, Abdulmutallab, ever met face-to-face in Yemen, but in the months prior to the attempted bombing, as Armen Keteyian just reported, the two men were communicating. Sources say at a minimum, Awlaki was providing spiritual support, and now investigators are pressing hard to know if he played a bigger role in perhaps introducing the suspect to terrorists. Meanwhile, Awlaki himself is a marked man. Sources say he was, in fact, one of the targets of a Yemeni-led airstrike carried out just before Christmas. Apparently, he survived, Harry.
Bob, the other question we have for you tonight about this similar attack with a Somalian.
Yeah, it's a little puzzling, but I don't think we should draw too much into this. The arrest that you're talking about happened 6 weeks ago in Mogadishu when a man tried to board an airplane there carrying a bag. It had dangerous chemicals inside and a syringe. Now investigators, of course, need to find out if that arrest is connected at all to Detroit, but there are major differences. For example, the Somali suspect was carrying large quantities of chemicals, more than a pound of ammonium nitrate, half a liter of sulfuric acid, and that was too much to hide on his body. It is, though, worth noting that Somalia is yet another active terror network home, al-Shabaab. And already, as we've reported many times, Harry, al-Shabaab has reached out and recruited dozens of Americans who are looking to join jihad.
All right. Bob Orr in Washington tonight. Thanks. As we mentioned, Dutch authorities said today they're going to start using those full-body imaging scanners on flights to the United States. They were not in use before, the Dutch say, because American officials didn't want them. Cheryl Atkinson has more on the pros and cons of these controversial machines.
Today, Dutch and U.S. officials offered new details of their apparent dispute over why body scans weren't already being used in the Netherlands. The Dutch Minister of Justice blamed the U.S., saying the United States didn't accept body scanners as a primary screening resource until now, and also wanted to have a metal detector used. U.S. Homeland Security countered by saying the Dutch don't need the United States' permission to use better security, such as body scanners. We obviously support advanced imaging technology as we use it here.
You're gonna step inside the machine.
Today, officials at Reagan National showed how 40 body scanners now in use at 19 airports can detect objects like a cell phone. There are plans to quickly deploy 150 more machines, with 300 more on the way. Some say the scanners are an invasion of privacy, but they're more effective than pat-downs or metal detectors. Explicit images are made of people who've done nothing wrong, but the images aren't stored, faces are blurred, and the image reviewers don't see the actual passengers. There's radiation exposure, but the exposure is tiny, equivalent to flying in a plane for 2 minutes.
It wouldn't bother me at all, as long as I'm safe getting on that airplane and getting off.
Since even body scans won't catch every security risk, there's pressure to do more. Some say political correctness should be abandoned in favor of profiling passengers based on factors such as behavior, profession, and age, like authorities do in Israel.
You have to put people in the right boxes, if I may say so, in order to have the right conclusion.
One controversy with the body scans is that passengers in the U.S. and the Netherlands can opt out and instead get a pat-down, which is widely considered less effective. In other words, a terrorist can actually defeat the body scan by simply choosing a full pat-down instead. And officials differ, Harry, on how much a pat-down can catch.
Cheryl Atkinson at Reagan National tonight. Thanks. Ominous words today in Iran. The Tehran police chief vowed no mercy for anti-government protesters, saying they'll, quote, be crushed. Evidence of what that could mean turned up on the internet today, a video that appears to show a protester being run over by police vehicles on Sunday. There were marchers in the streets today, but this was a pro-government rally sponsored by the regime. Many workers got the day off so they could take part. And that's the CBS Evening News. For Katie Couric, I'm Harry Smith. Thanks for watching. I'll see you first thing tomorrow on The Early Show. Good night.